Hey, aloha mai kako. Welcome to the 20th installment of the KL Center for Sustainable Island Food Systems Brown Bag Speaker Series. Mahalo everyone for joining us today as we continue our focus on a foundational element of Hawaii's food future and the current state of school food systems in Hawaii. Before we move forward, I want to begin with a special mahalo to Leidi, Natalie, and Annalisa. This session and this broader two-part conversation wouldn't be possible without their time, thoughtfulness, and deep commitment to Hawaii's keiki and school food systems. Beyond helping shape today's discussion, each of them is doing critical ongoing work across policy, operations, and community partnerships to strengthen how our schools nourish students, connect food, education, and ʻāina. So we're truly grateful for their leadership and collaboration. My name is Ioane, and on behalf of the center, I want to also extend our gratitude to today's presenters and to all of you for being a part of this important conversation about how we nourish keiki and build a more resilient, ʻāina-based, and equitable food system across our islands. Please scan the QR code on the current slide to access our center's website, and we'll also be dropping our website as well. In addition, a YouTube recording of today's webinar will be shared through our MailChimp newsletter after the event, along with a recap, key highlights, and a preview of our upcoming brown bag session. And if you're not already signed up for our newsletter, I'll also be dropping a link to that in the chat, so you can do so, sign up today during today's presentation. A little bit about the center. KL Center for Sustainable Island Food Systems is an initiative in the University of Hawaii system, co-directed by Dr. Noah Lincoln and Dr. Albie Miles. And our mission is to uplift food system transformation statewide by supporting food security and justice, ecological sustainability, education, storytelling, policy, cross-sector collaboration, and community partnerships. Across Hawaii, food system innovation is abundant, but it's often siloed. So the Brown Bag Speaker Series was created to bridge those gaps and amplify work happening across sectors and build shared understanding around the most urgent issues shaping Hawaii's food future. Our long-term vision is to understand how the UH system can best support food system transformation in service to the people and the ʻāina of Hawaii. And some of our broader work, the KL Center engages in applied research and policy analysis, community-based education, convenings, and professional development, as well as cross-sector partnerships linking academia, government, community organizations, and practitioners. By convening voices from across the agriculture, education, and policy landscape, we seek to strengthen Hawaii's pathway toward food sovereignty and ecological balance. Each of our presenters today will be sharing insights from their unique organizational roles and on-the-ground experience, and audience participation will take place through the Zoom Q&A feature. So please feel free to submit your questions at any time, and we will address them during the discussion. If we can't get to them all, we'll get contact info and email answers back to folks asking questions. Excuse me. So today's topic is Reimagining School Food Systems in Hawaii, Part 2. This session builds directly on the foundation established in Part 1, which focus on how school meals are delivered statewide and some of the structural conditions shaping Hawaii's school food system. Part 2 will shift our attention toward the systems that must be strengthened in order to expand local food integration and ʻāina-based education. So today we're going to explore some current data on local food procurement and production, on-the-ground food production capacity and institutional supply realities, as well as institutional pathways for aligning procurement, education, and ʻāina-based values. So together, these perspectives will help us understand how schools fit within and can help shape Hawaii's broader food system. As we discussed in December, Hawaii's school food system continues to face persistent challenges, such as heavy reliance on imported foods, procurement rules that limit flexibility, gaps in aggregation, distribution, and processing capacity, and misalignment between production, policy, and institutional demand. And at the same time, important opportunities are emerging, growing coordination between producers, food hubs, and institutions, and increasing attention to local procurement and policy levers, and institutional interest in aligning food purchasing with mission, education, and ʻāina-based values. So Part 2 will focus on how these opportunities can be strengthened and aligned to support school food systems at scale. Today's presenters, we're honored to welcome three leaders whose work helps illuminate the connections between data, production, and institutional strategy within our food system. First, we'll have Hunter Heaivilin, Food Systems Planner, Supersistence.org. Hunter will present current data on local food procurement and production across Hawaii. We have Leanne Kami, Senior Project Manager of Sustainable Industry Development at Kamehameha Schools. Leanne will discuss how large educational institutions can align procurement with mission and values, amongst other things. And Donna Shapiro, CEO of Hawaii ʻUlu Cooperative. And Donna will offer a perspective on what farmers need to reliably supply schools and some challenges of aggregation, distribution, and institutional procurement. And with that, we're excited to begin today's conversation. Please join me in welcoming Hunter Heaivilin.
Thank you. Aloha, everyone. As Ioane shared, my name is Hunter Heaivilin. I'm a food systems planner. My firm is called Supersistence, and we work mostly with government, nonprofit clients on all manner of from planning to policy. So I'm going to share a little bit about some of my policy perspectives, some of the recent efforts, and a few ideas on the horizon. And we'll get the screen shared here. Ioane, are you able to share from your end, or should I pop that up on mine here?
If you can pop it up, that's fine.
All
If
right,
you,
I'll have
if
to
it's
replace your share, which was
okay.
request here.
Oh, sorry, I was supposed to stop sharing. All right, sorry about that. Go for it.
Okay, let's see, get into there. The ever tricky can see your slides and your notes, but we'll go for it. Can you see a slide?
Just a dark screen right now says, there you go. Looking great, Hunter.
Okay, cool. So, as I shared, Hunter Heaivilin with Supersistence. That's my consulting firm. I also am a PhD candidate at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. So you will note maybe some academic jargon and political economic analysis woven into some of this. My apologies ahead of time. So, in 2021, we made a promise to the Keiki of Hawaii saying that we were going to increase the volume of local foods on this plate of school kitchens, on the moving through school kitchens and onto children's plates across the island. This was a work really kind of culminating from a number of years of activism and efforts both within and outside of government through programs like the Aina through the Hawaii Farm to School and School Garden Hui, and many others. And as a result of these goals, now a few years on, unfortunately, our local procurement hasn't reached some of the goalposts that we set for ourselves. What we're now seeing is that DOE procurement has lagged behind the initial goal set up to the extent that in recent years we've actually exempted them from some of those goals, which, while it may sound far from ideal, it is a little bit even less of the largesse afforded by the state to other state departments who are originally covered under a Partner Act 176, which originally mandated all state departments. In practice, what ended up happening is if your department submitted a report about how much local procurement you did, you were then covered in the next year's requirements. But for those who decided not to follow the government mandate to increase their local purchasing and report it to the legislature, they were then exempted from previous years. While unfortunate, at least the Department of Education was still under the requirements, and I'll share a little bit about where we're at with that. In some of these competing and conflicting, in some cases, goalposts that were set. Originally, Act 175 and 176 had different goals for the same state department. One covered just the Department of Education, one covered all state departments, so they weren't in alignment. Currently, what we see is this unified state goal of 50% procurement from local sources by 2050 for all agencies, and we backtrack from there with a somewhat alignment going all the way to 2024, but previous goals where we were going to have a more stringent progress expected by the Department of Education have been exempted in some cases. So in practice, in recent reporting, this is what that local procurement looks like. Of that handful of percent of local purchases, over half came from ground beef. And the way the bill is written, and while it's not clear from the reporting that was provided to the legislature, the way the bill is written, you can actually mix in other products within some of these goods. So, for example, if you were to be seeking a school contract and providing ground beef, you could be mixing in imported beef with that and incorporate the cost of your local mixing into the calculation of the local percentage. So there are some loopholes that I think are important to be aware of in the existing policy infrastructure that we have that are guiding us towards how we want to pursue localization. This isn't intended as a dig at the cattle industry or processing industry. And talking with folks in the cattle industry in particular, this is can be of benefit. It allows higher priced cuts to go to higher priced opportunities in the marketplace, and for the ground beef to be mixed in, say, with other imported goods. In my recent, more academic review of some of our consolidated meat processing, nearly 1 million pounds have been imported of ground beef from Australia and New Zealand. I think it was 800,000 pounds in the past few years under the banner of companies like Hawaiʻi Meats or Hawaii Sustainable Beef Enterprises, which controls the processing infrastructure in Pauilo and Kalaeloa plants on Hawaii Island and Oahu, respectively. So just giving a little bit of sense of what some of the bottlenecks are and some of the players may be as we move forward towards a local food future on our plates. As we think about that future, however, what I've really am starting to see is a alignment of a lot of the state resources towards capital-intensive agriculture at scale over what might be seen as the largest volume of agricultural operations, which tend to be labor-intensive agriculture. This, again, in the academic language, is sometimes viewed as a productivism. It's a focus on the caloric output, as opposed to us asking questions about who benefits from these various forms of state subsidy that are increasingly coming into view that support agriculture overall, and school food in particular. Can you guys still see my screen? I'm hoping so. All right. Gosh. So what the state is aligning towards, in my view, is somewhat represented in a recent report from the Department of Agriculture that highlighted what they viewed as 579 viable farm operations. And these tend to be agricultural endeavors that are at a certain scale of production, a certain scale of acreage, and a certain economic value of output. And the concern that I see is that the investments that the state is making in central kitchens, in processing infrastructure, and in land leases in many cases are really focused on de-risking certain players in the marketplace. While this says the wrong players, that's maybe a little bit more biased perspective, as I do represent Hawaii Farmers Union at our legislature, and we are largely composed of smallholder operations. But by de-risking these certain players and investing in certain scales of infrastructure, it ensures that these various forms of subsidy will be directed, or all but ensures these various forms of subsidy will be directed towards capital-intensive agricultural operations, of which there are, a few hundred, versus the labor-intensive agricultural operations, of which there are several thousand within the state. This is compounded by some of the additional barriers that are being put up by the DOE in previous years with requirements for generally for good agricultural practices or GAP certification, which is an administrative choice not delineated in our law that creates an additional hurdle for smallholders. While there are programs now, fortunately, like Group GAP that can enable smallholders to achieve these certifications, it is a barrier that we are requiring for local products that we're not requiring for imported products. Which again asks the question, why would we be doing so? In the scroll on this is not helping my case here. As we look to what we might be able to do going forward from this standpoint, right, there is a lot of information that can inform good strategic planning for school food systems. Currently, what we have publicly in many cases is an annual report to the legislature. And with this data, it doesn't afford us a whole lot, right? That's where some of the previous numbers and chart were coming from. What we really need is improved local production data. Hopefully this year we'll see some progress and support from the state legislature for that, as well as ideally some more granular as well as consolidated or aggregated demand data coming from the Department of Education. And again, this is, sort of my perspective. I'm not within the state government, so I'm not privy to all of the purchasing data or that they may have at their fingertips. But this kind of information can help inform menu planning and ideally will help inform some of the purchasing patterns that the state can pursue to ensure that the support of local purchasing goes to not just large scale operations, but can support smallholders as well. So when we think about what this might look like as a vision, in my mind, the train is moving with the central kitchen approach and this Nourish Hawaii, as it's been termed, efforts centered in Wahiawa primarily, that are imagining that school food is something that is produced at scale, processed at scale, and distributed to kitchens across the state. This is the beginning of mapping, which again, I apologize is not complete, but the idea of this is to start to explore what are some of the regional products that school kitchens could begin to integrate into their menu planning or into their scratch cooking, should that be where they want to go. There are models that we can think of or that we can point to even locally that do have centralized processing that then distributes to a variety of kitchens around the state. For example, HPC Foods does a lot of food preparation, slicing, dicing, par cooking, etc., that then gets distributed to franchise locations for a variety of fast food and other entities. If we can imagine then that we are moving large-scale commodity production from local sources through central kitchens, we can imagine then that there is a space in menu planning to incorporate smallholder production from regional sources, or maybe even moved through the food hub network that's already well established across the islands that could move regional products from one area to another to ensure that scratch cooking and the subsidy that comes from local purchasing is of benefit not just to large agricultural operations, but to the largest number of agricultural operations that we have across the state, which is to say small and family farms. So looking historically, some of the way that we've tried to build in or to increase agricultural purchasing and production has been to have anchor purchasers. In the post-war era, there was a project called the Produce Information Exchange that brought together produce buyers, brokers, producers, and others to leverage the data that they all had in silos and explore how by working across these different parts of the value chain, they might be able to better align production with demand and shift demand's focus to better align with the existing production that we had. In that era, it was really the defense industries and our armed forces that were the primary purchasers. In this I view institutions as being a key opportunity. All right, so we can think of that as the state institutions. This could be large schools that are private or public, as well as our visitor industry as a key marketplace. So this mock-up here is, again, another effort to begin to explore if we had better data access, and this is building off of work that's already underway with a couple of counties and partners in the visitor industry in some cases. We can then start to imagine what type of information we could glean about the food system to better inform the strategic planning of our menus, of our farms, and of the future of where our subsidies will be directed. So with that, I will leave it to those who have much more experience on the ground to highlight some of the recent procurement efforts and successes and some of the opportunities that are doing the best work across the islands to really bring together smallholders into collaborative efforts and ensure increased access by institutional purchasers.
Mahalo nui, Hunter. Up next, we have Leanne, and I'll be putting some videos in that will accompany some of her slides as well. So please check those out, and don't forget to populate the Q&A feature as you get questions. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Ioane. Are you able to see my screen? Okay, perfect. Mahalo for the introduction. So my name is Leanne Kami. I'm a senior project manager at Kamehameha School, and my role for the past 5 years has been really focusing on our local purchasing initiative with our campuses and preschools. So as Ioane mentioned, he'll pop some videos in the chat. I, like Hunter, apologize. My slide deck is data heavy, but I wanted to give you folks the opportunity to hear some of the mo'olelo and connect more with the people and partnerships and places that really make this work happen. So please do check out those video links if you're interested in learning more about what we're sharing. But what I plan to go over is our food system journey. So at a high level, kind of sharing from the highest level down to the granular on how we approached our food system initiative. One question that I do get asked from time to time is, as an educational institution, why is Kamehameha Schools so involved or interested in food systems and agriculture? So this is an infographic that shows, that KS really, as the largest private landowner in the state, is in a unique position that we touch every portion of the food value chain, from production, processing and retail, to consumption and waste. And so, as Hunter mentioned, with the many thousands of smallholder farms in the state, a lot of those smallholder farmers and ranchers are tenants on Kamehameha Schools land and are part of our leasing program, as well as supermarkets, restaurants, farmers markets, and food hubs. How we approach this work is, back during the COVID-19 pandemic, we had a unique opportunity in that the timing aligned with our 5-year strategic plan revision. So every 5 years, we take a look at our strategic plan and set new goals for the entire organization. And so it was an opportunity to address some of the needs that we were experiencing during the pandemic around food security and distribution. So at the highest level, we set a goal, our leadership set a goal to help support resilient economies. So for us, that the food system initiative really fit under that nicely. And you can see there on the right side, that circle, our focus areas were ho'onui, ho'ohui, and makemake, looking at how do we increase food production on our ʻāina, how do we help strengthen the middle value chain aggregation, and how do we influence demand for local foods. And I won't go into all the details of the numbers, but this just gives you an idea of the different measures that we looked at, from setting targets for our campuses on local purchasing, as well as setting targets to increase lands leased for agricultural production. And what was new for us was starting an investment fund that we hadn't embarked on before. So on this next slide, This is a lot of information, so bear with me, and I won't belabor and go into all of it. But at the top there, you can see our food system investment fund. So this is new for Kamehameha Schools in that it was the first time we explored equity and direct loans to local companies as part of our investment portfolio. And I'm so excited to share the panel with Donna because the ʻUlu Co-op was our very first investment out of the fund. It just made a lot of sense, being, we've collaborated long before the pandemic. And also, many of the farmers who are part of the cooperative are also already Kamehameha Schools tenants. So it felt like a natural fit. So you can see, other than the ʻUlu Co-op, some of our other first investments that came out of that $10 million round. We tracked data around jobs supported, number of farms supported, and also the pounds of food that were grown and processed or distributed through these investments. And I'm excited to say that we received approval for an additional set of $25 million that we will be launching another fund soon that will be broader than just food systems, to include other business opportunities connected to our ʻāina. In the next bracket, you can see our food systems impact. So over the 5 years, we did actually exceed our target of 50% by reaching 53%. And one thing I want to point out here is that for us, we did focus on really smallholders and scaling up our smaller farms and local processors. So one of the strategies we took was around forward contracting and preferred vendor agreements. So how do we help our small businesses do the paperwork, get connected to commercial kitchens, and get on our preferred vendor list to make it easier for our campuses and our preschools to procure directly from them. We also, like I mentioned, focus on our ag production. So you can see some of our numbers there around acres leased. And then we also made a strategic focus on native Hawaiian crops. And for us, what I'm really excited to share is that our campuses, when we started this in 2020, some of our campuses were serving poi, once or twice a year for special events, and now are at the point where there's poi available daily, as well as on our Kapalama campus, they've started this year adding luau stew to the soup line. So there's always a daily option for poi and luau stew. And so that's one of the things we're really excited to share. Next, I'm going to go into just a couple of examples. I talked about the ho'ohui, ho'onui, ho'ohui, and makemake. So I wanted to give you some examples of what that looks like. How did we get to these numbers? And so really it started long before the initiative. And, the initiative was 5 years, but really we've been involved in this space for a long time. And one example is through our Mahiai Matchup program. And you can see our 2024-25 winners there, as well as some of the stats across the 12 years of the Mahiai Matchup program. Another program I mentioned, we wanted to, so that's one of our existing pre-established programs, but a new program that came out of the initiative was Poi for the Pepe. And this kind of sits in multiple focus areas, but really the idea here was to reconnect our keiki with poi. Poi has gotten very expensive. Families are not able to access it as readily as they would like. And so this was an opportunity for us to provide keiki and their ohana with a 1 pound bag of poi once a month. And we tied education to that in providing monthly ohana engagement activities, whether it was sharing a recipe of how to make poi pancakes or different kilo, activities or planting activities in the mala for farm to school connections. And it was also an opportunity for us to connect regional vendors, these poi millers and kalo growers in the region to the preschools. And what we found is just naturally on its own is as the keiki were getting exposed and doing these engagement activities, the farmers and the millers were actually having opportunity to come into the classroom and share about what they do and build that stronger pilina with the community partners. For our campus local purchasing, you can see there's a snapshot there on the left around our spend by product group. And one thing I want to highlight that's different from the DOE and how we measure is that for us, we knew we had a 5-year runway to hit our target. So we got really strategic and got into the weeds on the numbers. And so we enrolled in the Good Food Purchasing Program, which is a national program that helped us really dive into our data. So on the left, that snapshot is what they helped us understand where our purchasing really sat. And when we took a look at that, we realized that 60% of our purchasing was in produce and protein. And those were areas that we felt that we had the ability to move the needle within 5 years versus, Hawaii has limited production or limited lands available for grains and legumes, milk and dairy, our dairy industry, there's only, one functioning dairy farm. So our goal of 50% was focused on produce and protein. So when you see these numbers here on the right, I tried to do a breakdown to show the differences. So that top line there in blue, that's our measure of 50% was on produce and proteins. And we defined that to include processed in the state because our focus was not only just on locally raised and grown, but also protecting local jobs and stimulating local economies and resilient economies. Our focus first was if we don't have enough production, say, of poultry, that's okay. We can use continent-raised birds, but let's at least bring the purchasing to locally processed. So we partnered with folks like 50th State Chicken and Kukui Meats. So the chicken might not be raised in Hawaii, but at least we're supporting jobs and processing locally. And hopefully we can get to a point where we are able to raise enough poultry in the state to source. Our Maui campus is able to actually source enough chicken and pork that their proteins are all locally sourced for the most part, I would say 90%. But for our Kapalama campus and our Hawaii campus, we're not quite there. So it may not be 100% raised locally, but we are shifting to locally processed. And so on the bottom in that color in green there, you can see that's if we count greater than 50% local ingredients. That's kind of how the numbers differ. One thing I did want to point out on this slide is that, speaking of economic resilience, when we started this work in 2020, 2021, we went from $280,000 in local purchasing to over 1.5 million in local purchasing in fiscal year 25. So, when you look across the 5 years, that equates to over 4.5 million in direct economic impact. And if you consider the impacts of economic multiplier effect of those dollars circulating in our local economy, that equates to over $8 million in economic impact. So this slide here is a snapshot of our purchasing trends. So one of the strategies that we used was to, like I said, get really strategic and understand our purchasing line by line. What are we spending the most on? What crops do we have the highest impact if we import replacement? So you can see on the left there, our native crop trends. We've significantly increased our native crop consumption. I do want to point out that ʻUala there looks like we didn't move very much. But one of the reasons for that is because we were able to find a supplier of B-grade ʻUala. So that brought our price down significantly to where, we were purchasing ʻUala for half price or less. So that dollar value didn't shift a lot, but our volume consumption did. And what that allowed us to do is take that cost savings and shift it towards other crops that may be more expensive locally. And so you see in that middle column, our import reduction trends. Most of these crops are one-to-one. For example, we shifted from imported banana to local banana. The one crop you might question on there when you look at it is apple. And so that's one that was not a direct correlation because we don't grow many apples or stone fruits in Hawaii. But what we did there is focus on, okay, what can we replace for apple? So when it's in season, can we do star fruit, rambutan, longan, some dragon fruit? And on the far right, you'll see the top import. So that's kind of how we shifted our top import crops. Real quickly, this is just our local purchasing criteria. So I kind of went over the produce protein, how we define that. For us, food safety is very important, but understanding, when we looked at the Food Safety Modernization Act, and realized that, if certain crops fall under that, kalo, for example, most crops that have a kill step that need to be cooked are exempt from that regulation. So we decided to not opt for requiring FSMA or GAP certification. Our understanding is that farms who sell less than $500,000 and only sell within 275 miles of their farm also qualify for exemptions from the Food Safety Modernization Act certification. So although we really support GAP and food safety certification, it's a preferred requirement for us versus, I should say, a preferred qualification, but not a requirement. One thing we really wanted to stress with our partners is that we wanted whatever we purchased to be additive production, not diverted from other sources. So we wanted to make sure that if we put in an order, that it wasn't going to be taken away from another school or a hotel or whatever, another sales avenue. We wanted to make sure that our purchases were additive. The last couple of slides are just really high level of how food hubs have supported this work. And really, we would not have been able to do this work without the support of our food hubs. I have the carrots in that picture there, and that's one example I like to share around some myth busting that the co-ops have, the food hubs have been able to help us do. So for example, when we started the work, we anticipated that local would cost more. So we set aside a pot of funds for that contingency. And what we realized, after year 2 is that we really weren't having to tap into that funds. And so we were able to use those funds to explore other procurement tools that I'll share on the next slide. Real short anecdote is we were able to find that, for example, for Laku'oko'a, we challenged ourselves to source as much local ingredients as we could for that one meal service. And we worked with FarmLink and Kahumana and some others to source as much local as we could. And when we compared the prices from the large distributors versus what we could get local, we found that the price difference for the entire meal service was about $100 to $200. So it wasn't a significant increase to switch local. What we found is if you look crop by crop, there may be a significant difference. For example, carrots. Local carrots were significantly more expensive than imported carrots. But when we looked across a product mix, we were actually able to come relatively close to our import numbers. And the carrots is a great example because in working with Kahumana and understanding the farmer system, we were able to actually reduce that cost significantly to make it comparable to import costs by taking baby carrots instead of mature carrots. So the baby carrots you see there, the kitchen loved it because they didn't have to peel. It was easy to wash. They could just save on the labor prep time. And on the farmer side, they were able to reduce the cost because it meant harvesting earlier. So they could get another crop rotation. So if they're looking at dollar per square foot, they were able to recoup that cost savings that they passed on to us by adding another crop rotation during the same time period. So working with the food hubs really helped us to dive into those, nuanced nitty-gritty things that you don't typically get to explore in procurement. And then lastly, just real quick, I'll share a highlight. As I mentioned, we had that pot of funding set aside. What we were able to do is explore other procurement tools like forward contracting. So we partnered with FarmLink Hawaii to work with Hawaii Banana Source to scale banana production. And, we're at the tail end of this pilot, and there's a lot of things that we learned. Some of the benefits are, aside from scaling production, is that we were able to support some sustainable practices, for example, allowing the farm to invest in reusable crates and things like that. It also de-risked our financial investment because FarmLink is part of our investment company, so we're helping to support them building their value chain and supply chain. The challenges that we're still kind of working through are aligning expectations. When you go through a big distributor, they may have the infrastructure to have a full warehouse full of bananas to where they can pick out of 5,000 pounds, 100 pounds that meet the perfect specification of ripeness that the kitchen may want, that a small farm or a food hub may not have ability to have that infrastructure or to have the volume to pick. So having flexibility over those types of ripeness or expectations and product specifications were very important. And then also it's a new way of procurement. So, the systems aren't in place. The record keeping, how to track prepaid versus, paying on demand. Those are things that are still in the process, but it was a good experience. And I think there's potential to build out more forward contracting opportunities. And that's all I had. Thank you very much.
Mahalo, Leanne. Wow, there's a lot of information. Thank you so much. Great presentation. Now we'll welcome Donna Shapiro.
Thank you, Ioane and Leanne. Thanks for that. That's always so inspiring to hear what you guys are doing, and we're honored to be one of your partners. Okay, let me just pull up my deck here. Okay, can you see my slide? All right. So aloha, everyone. My name is Donna Shapiro. I'm the CEO of the Hawaiʻi ʻUlu Cooperative. Just a little bit about us. We are a farmer-owned business. We were founded in 2016, so we celebrated our 9-year anniversary a few months ago. And our focus is ʻulu. Our mission is to revitalize ʻulu as a viable crop and dietary staple for Hawaii. But we are diversified. Our farmers are diversified, and I'll share more about who our farmers are in just a moment. But we really try to take on the part of the value chain that's hard for our farmers to manage on their own so that they can focus on farming, which is frankly difficult enough on its own in Hawaii. And our goal is to build a scalable model for Hawaii so that even though our farms are predominantly small scale, they can work together and accomplish amazing feats, including supplying all of our schools. So if you're unfamiliar with the co-op model, this is just a diagram that shows how it works. Starting on the left side at number 1, our farmers own the co-op. They are the only shareholders with a vote. They govern the co-op. We have a board of directors that's made up entirely of farmers, and they patronize the co-op by supplying us with their fresh crop. From there, the co-op aggregates to reach economies of scale, processes, creates value-added products to extend shelf life, which is really important for ʻulu in particular. And then we market those products to businesses and consumers, schools. We do a lot of education to help increase demand for ʻulu and some of the other indigenous staple crops that we offer, which aren't widely consumed anymore. And then hopefully at the end of the year, that product is all sold and profits are distributed back to the farmers according to their patronage, which means if a farmer contributes 5% of our crop in a given year, they would be entitled to 5% of the profit sharing. So who are our farmers? We've grown a lot since we started. We started with 9 founding farmers located all over Hawaii Island, from Kohala to Puna, Hilo to Kona. And now we're at 215 farmers and counting across 4 islands. So Oahu, Maui, and Kauai are all represented in our membership. Collectively, our farmers have planted 7,600 trees. About 4,000 of them are already fruiting in some capacity, not necessarily at full capacity. On average, our farmers only have about an acre planted, less than 40 trees, I think 38 trees right now. A quarter have 5 trees or less, so they're really small. 75% are backyard or part-time farmers, so only a quarter of our farmers are full-time commercial growers. Our farmers tend to be a little bit younger than Hawaii's average at 54 versus 62 years old. They tend to be more often beginning farmers, having farmed for less than 10 years, 57% compared to 31% in the state. And we have about almost a quarter Native Hawaiian farmers compared to 9% in Hawaii overall. So that's just a snapshot of who our growers are. In some ways, they're very representative of Hawaii's farming community overall, especially with their small size and diversified nature. We have two commercial kitchen facilities on Hawaii Island with long-term leases. And this is really key to enabling us to do what we do. And I'll share the mo'olelo of our work with the Hawaii Department of Education in just a moment, but understanding how we operate is sort of foundational to understanding that story. So in Kona, we have our headquarters, which is where we do we call it wet processing. Basically, it's where we make all of our frozen product. That's mostly minimal processing, par steaming, and then freezing our farmers' crops. We've been in this facility since 2017. We're currently working on some big infrastructure upgrades to increase our capacity from about 500,000 pounds per year to 2 million pounds per year. And then in Hilo, we have our second facility, which is owned by KS. And it's called the Alai Post-Harvest Facility. We're also upgrading this facility right now to increase our capacity. And this is where we intake fruit from our East Hawaii Island members, who actually comprise the biggest productive region, actually across the state. The most ʻUlu is grown in East Hawaii Island right now. So this is really important, even just as an aggregation facility, so that farmers can easily access a place to drop off their crop and get paid for it. But this is also where we make our flour products. So we call that dry processing. And we take our ʻUlu, slice or shred it, dehydrate it, and then mill it. And from there, we're able to make different dry blends. On our neighbor islands, we don't have any of our own facilities. We operate in partnership with values-aligned partners. On Kauai, we currently work with Resi Roots outside of Lihue. On Oahu, we work with both Kualoa and Kahumana. And on Maui, we partner with Maui Breadfruit Company and Maui Gold. So that's kind of how we do the work. And through having, building processing capacity, we're able to make this pretty diverse product line. I think we have about 40 SKUs right now. This product here in the middle where my cursor is, this was kind of our first product and it's still our best seller. It's basically bulk, minimally processed, mature ʻulu. So in this form, ʻulu can be sold to schools as well as hospitals, restaurants, and it can be substituted for potatoes, for example, in really any recipe you can think of. And also, of course, incorporated into traditional dishes, whether it's luau, stew, or even re-steamed and pounded into poi. And so we have these bulk containers for all of our different crops, which include kalo, uala, and pala'ai, in addition to ʻulu. We also have retail versions and a variety of value-added products and flour. So now I will switch over to just sharing our experience working with DOE specifically. So we've been working with DOE since 2018. So actually, it's been 8 years. It's been a while, for most of our life, really, as an organization. And I sort of broke this into 3 phases. Phase 1 is pre-COVID, starting at the very beginning of 2018 and lasting through early 2020 when COVID hit. Over this time period, we supplied DOE with 4 crops, ʻulu, uala, green papaya, and mai'a, all minimally processed, frozen. They also all started as monthly specials, harvest of the month menu items. And then after they were sort of tested and piloted, became regular menu items. In these early years, as the co-op was just getting started, the impact was really, really significant for us. Over a 3 school year period, we moved about 100,000 pounds of crop and generated almost $400,000 for our farmers. We also developed educational resources in partnership with School Food Services Branch and the Hawaii Farm to School Network, which we've been a member of since those days, such as the posters you can see here. So on the lower left-hand corner, this is from our farms to your school. This is like a cafeteria poster. Get ono for ʻulu. On the right-hand side, there's a home recipe for chicken green papaya soup that could go home with the kids. And then a get to know ʻulu poster, which was again more for the classrooms. I will say that there was limited integration between the educational efforts and the food being served, which was definitely an area for improvement. This middle picture at the bottom here is actually showing the very first dish that DOE served with our ʻulu. It was in early 2018, and it was a Kalua pork spinach ʻulu wrap. I don't know who came up with that menu item, but they're no longer serving it in that way. I'll get into some of the new ways in a moment, but it's a nice little tidbit of history there. Okay, so phase two was during and right after COVID, so early 2020 through 2023. For us, local buying stopped overnight. As soon as COVID hit, schools shifted to a grab and go menu. It was mostly imported food, and SFSB stopped purchasing from us overnight. And it was the same thing with, restaurants and hotels. It was a hard time for everybody. We didn't stop working on sort of farm to school efforts, but we did shift our focus to relationship building and resource development. So during this kind of 3-year period, we continued doing a lot of recipe development. And I know other organizations did as well, and there's a tie-in with that later. One of the recipe partnerships we had was with Kealakahe High School, where their culinary program tested recipes, refined them, and you can find these recipes on our website today, actually. Another sort of stream of education was classroom integrated resources. So the ʻUlu Education Toolkit was developed before and during this period. It's now available on the University of Hawaii's College of Education website, the STEM Squared website. This is a searchable database of standards-aligned ʻUlu education resources, which is still growing. There was the development of this Kumu ʻUlu box, which was like a shippable all-in-one ʻUlu product samples plus educational materials for parents to use at home while their kids were learning from home. That one is no longer available. Fortunately, we don't have to do that anymore, speaking as a parent. And then another one was the Ho'opili'ai program, which is still very active. And Ho'opili'ai was a program envisioned during COVID to maintain the connection between our farmers and schools. And the way it works is that we're able to ship classroom and culinary size boxes directly to schools, and they're paired with, again, standards aligned lesson plans for all of these different crops. And this program is actually still ongoing, so separate from SFSB, it's more of a teacher connection, and I'll share a little bit more about it in just a moment. And then we also partnered with the Hawaii Child Nutrition Program to create a series of educational videos. So we were busy during this period, but unfortunately not by supplying schools, not public schools anyway. So here's an example of some of the educational resources. These are the CHCFP recipes, sorry, not recipes, but just resources. And these are on our website now. This was a video series commissioned by HCNP with a USDA grant. And this is Chef Kealoha Domingo over here, sort of teaching other cafeteria and food service staff how to incorporate Hawaii grown staple crops into school meals while meeting USDA dietary guidelines. One of the neat things is that the USDA recognizes all of these Hawaii grown staple crops as equivalents to whole grain. So in every meal, there has to be a certain whole grain serving on the plate. And schools are actually able to substitute ʻulu, kalo, ʻuala, and even palaʻai as a whole grain if they do it in the right way. And so these resources are teaching schools how to do that. And then here's ho'opiliai as just another example of what happened in those gap years during COVID. And over the last 3 years, the program has had a big impact, almost 20,000 pounds, 50,000 students reached, over 200 schools served, over $120,000 to local farmers. So even though the relationship with SFSB paused, there was still work being done. And so this is phase 3. I'm happy to report that ʻUlu co-op products are back on the menu. Took a while, but we're really happy to be back there. And this is sort of split into 2 groups. One is the regular breakfast and lunch menu items. So currently we have 3 SKUs on the regular menu. ʻUlu, steamed and frozen ʻulu and kalo, as well as ʻulu flour. These photos on the left are showing the ʻulu flour banana bread that's now a breakfast item at schools across the state, and I've heard good things about it. Some of these were actually menu items developed and piloted in partnership with SFSB in October of 2023 under a USDA LFPP grant. So, it takes time to, I think, build the pipeline to get these crops back on the menu. It's not something that can happen quickly. The promising menu items from that project were tested as small school purchases last school year. And the impact in just one school year from this development is around 32,000 pounds, $190,000 back to farmers. And so this is, just 3 SKUs at the beginning of rebuilding the relationship. And the other element here is that we worked really hard, again, with SFSB and the Farm to School Network to develop more targeted educational resources that could be leveraged more easily, more effectively by schools at the same time as they're serving these foods to kids. Because there's been a lot of research that shows that's really important, not just to introduce what might be a new food to, a kid, but to do so with sort of wraparound information about why is this food important to eat? What are the benefits? What's the history? And really build a relationship between this person and this crop. And the younger you start, I think the easier that can be. But one of the things we're doing now is direct shipping some of these new posters to schools with product, and really letting the cafeterias request them. So we're hopeful that that will really improve the program and improve receptivity. And so this is the other piece of phase 3. It's the Local Food in Schools, or LFS program. This is another USDA grant program that HCNP, Hawaii Child Nutrition Program, applied for and received a few years ago already. There's 2 SKUs that the co-op offers through this program that are not on the regular menu, ʻuala and palaʻai. And on the upper left, you can see some of the ways they're serving these crops to schools: mashed purple sweet potato and honey butter roasted squash. This was also a very long time in development. The menu items were developed, piloted, and cafeteria managers were trained on them, I think in 2022 and 23 primarily, but some also in 2024. The program kicked off last year, but there were remaining funds that were unspent, so they received an extension and are trying to use up the rest of the funds this year. The impact of this program in a 1-year period is about 26,000 pounds of local crop and about $130,000 returned to farmers. So all of these, programs combined are really pretty impactful. And I believe that some of these new items and recipes are being considered for the regular menu in the following school year, in the next school year, which I think has been a good process, to find a way to pilot and test even at a smaller scale before rolling out at a larger scale. So just some summary reflections from our experience. I think on the one hand, we see that many farmers are very excited about supplying schools, even though it can be difficult. I think there's a lot of ideological reasons and sort of big picture, long-term impact reasons why farmers are excited about this possibility. But at the same time, most Hawaii farmers are far too small to sell to schools directly because there's misalignment in volume, their ability to provide the crops consistently throughout the year, their food safety compliance, and even just the logistics of how do I get my crop to all these schools. Currently, we have one school district in Hawaii. So, how is a single small farm going to supply all the schools across the state or even on its island? It's just not practical in many cases. And so it's really clear, and Hunter even mentioned this in the first presentation of the day, that we need these middle of the supply chain partners to provide aggregation, sometimes processing, compliance, distribution, all these things that individual small diversified farms tend to lack. But ideally, and this is really important, these partners need to be farmer centric. Otherwise, there's no there's nothing keeping them committed to working with the small local farmers because it's harder. It's so much harder to work with 215 small farmers than two big farmers. And so not everybody is going to provide this role. I think it's oftentimes the food hubs, the farmer co-op, the organizations that have this commitment as part of their DNA. Farmer co-ops can certainly play this role, but I think that organizational structure and business model matters much less than the why, the values underpinning the action. For our part, our biggest challenge to continuing to work with DOE mostly involves the communication and the time, the lead time, because we do need to increase production. We don't have the production currently in Hawaii among our small diversified farmers to meet the volumes that DOE needs, especially for new products or for new menu items. And forecasted volume needs really do need to be communicated with ample time. And ample time is sometimes a few years. So, understanding the time that takes and communicating effectively within those time periods is super important. I appreciated this AI version of my summary reflections because AI really reorganized my thoughts into three different groups, which I found helpful. On the one hand, we have the farmer to school gap, the misalignment. In the middle, we have ways to bridge the gap, food hubs, co-ops, aggregators that are farmer focused. And so in the path ahead, I think that, the future is looking good. I think we've really identified some of the major challenges and ways to overcome them. Volume forecasting, some structural issues that DOE is working to address, and ultimately with shared values and good communication on all sides, we can move the needle. I've seen it. I know it can be done. And so just to close, this is some photos of a 100% local lunch produced within budget by Laupahoehoe Public Charter School. They have an incredible food service director, Juliet Higgins, who's been doing these 100% local lunches within budget periodically throughout the school year. We're super honored to be one of their suppliers. You can see this list of the dishes they're offering: local venison meatballs, soft ʻUlu pancakes, local uala, avocado lime cilantro dressing. These are amazing lunches. And so I think the heroes and the solutionaries showing the way are out there and doing it, and we can learn a lot from them. Thank you.
Just wanted to thank everybody again. Thank you, Hunter. Thank you, Leanne. Just all the beautiful work you're all doing out there. It's much appreciated. If anybody has any additional questions, please email me at klmao@hawaii.edu. And have a great day, everybody. Aloha.
Mahalo. Mahiho.